Hello and welcome back to a new video. This week I'm going to be covering human cloning. Now, this is going to be the full-length documentary. I've had this kind of in my back pocket for a while, but a lot of people, when understanding what we're talking about with the idea of human cloning, there is a lot of confusion because of the deception around the theory of the actors wearing masks and any kind of discrepancy between celebrities, it gets explained away as actors wearing masks. And it's a popular theory. There's a lot of people who push that theory. I'm not against the idea of actors wearing masks and this big deception surrounding this great awakening and all these operations that are going on. But when you actually look into the science and ideas around human cloning, you will see that there is definitely something there. The science is there, and it's very easy to understand that there is a human replication, human cloning, the idea of synthetic people, and that is very much entwined with these ideas of actors in masks and different people and different kinds of creations of science. And that also connects to hybridization, combining multiple types of DNAs in order to make new creations of science. So, this is going to be the full length documentary on human cloning. I hope everybody gets something out of this and kind of understands these ideas and concept further by the time you finish up the video. So, first, we're going to be separating fact from fiction. Now, human cloning is an idea that has been around since the late 1800s or possibly even the early 1800s when you understand the ideas of the old world, what happened after the mud flood, and how civilization was put back on track using replicants, clones, and things like that. So, when we begin our research into any topic that has been ridiculed and dismissed, we have to collect as much evidence as we can to form the most complete theory. Now, what evidence do we have? What are our theories? And how do they connect to other theories and ideas we as researchers have gathered? So, when understanding what cloning is, and also how the controllers, tell you what they are doing, we must assume that cloning is a real thing. Now, the definition from Wikipedia says human cloning is the creation of a genetically identical copy of a human. The term is generally used to refer to artificial human cloning, which is the reproduction of human cells and tissue. It does not refer to the natural conception and delivery of identical twins. The possibilities of human cloning have raised controversies. These ethical concerns have prompted several nations to pass laws regarding human cloning. Now you can see there is many different ideas surrounding this. Is it just the manufacturers of cells? Is it just the manufacture of human organs, or is it um, fully grown people, which then can be inserted into our world or realm without much of the general public ever catching on? Now, a vast amount of information can be found on the subject of cloning and the world of genetic experimentation. This is the manufacture of artificial beings or clones, animal cloning, or the selective reproduction of certain bloodlines. Now, this also includes genetic creations of hybrid animals and hybrid humans, along with the combining of humans and animals into new creations of science like hybrids. Now, when Dolly the sheep was being cloned and disclosed to the general public, the art of cloning was mastered by many governments and private companies. Cloning of duplicates was a technology that was supposedly given to the Nazis by extraterrestrials, and this would be for the creation of super soldiers and honeypots, which could be used for blackmail or breeding programs. And here you can see the sheep grown in these bags or something, and they could grow them to whichever age they needed as just a, like a 1 or 2 year old, or you can fully grow them up to adult sized if you wanted to. So, another major aspect to the cloning conspiracy is the connection to the old world and the repopulation of our realm after the mud flood or the great reset of our realm. Evidence for human cloning can be found as far back as the first great reset of our realm. When the Tartarian Empire fell, our realm was depopulated by an unknown event, most likely with biological weapons, or this mud flood, or possibly a great biblical flood. Now, the repopulation was done by artificial beings or clones from old world technology. And this was done in underground facilities between 1820 and 1890s and was dispersed by way of these orphan trains throughout North America and Europe and things like that. Now, along with the more aged orphan train clones were these incubator babies, which were widespread throughout these world expos. And that's a big clue to kind of how deep this kind of theory goes. When you know what to look for, you will see it more and more and more. Now, these clones would have gotten civilization back up and running until the population was high enough to function on its own. And this could have been the introduction of Cro Magnon man from the Neanderthal man of the old world. And people think of, Cro-Magnon man and Neanderthal as these cave people. But when you really look into it and you question the narrative given to us, the Neanderthal man would have been the advanced Tartarian giant kind of people, and the Cro-Magnon man would have been the new creation of the reset population. Now, when the change was made, all of history was changed to fit the new narrative, and these replacements would have been able would have been the children who could learn and eventually reproduce a few generations and would be later removed via war. And this is why they start with these cloning operations, they get to a specific amount, and when they want to get rid of the clones, they stage a war in order to kill off the population, or as a way of explaining where massive sections of the population would have disappeared to. Now, you can look into all these infant incubators and uh, the cloning operation that happened during the old world at these expos. There's lots of evidence explaining these kind of incubator babies, and you see there's also connections. There's palm trees everywhere, which kind of connects to the idea of the island and how a lot of these cloning facilities are said to be on these military islands and stuff like that. So it's just another interesting thing to look at and to identify when we come up with our theories as to why certain people within our realm seem to have no personal consciousness because they are the NPCs and they are the byproduct of these cloned population of people. So these child clones would have been responsible for the child labor throughout the 1800s. They would disregard children, and this would become the basis for high status individuals using children and the young of today. The trend of pedophilia and adrenochrome and the connection to the elites would also be explained when you add the pieces together. Now, certain types of people may had a much longer lifespan due to the use of the adrenochrome and its life extending qualities. The clone children, when age appropriate, would have been one of the major fighting forces of the Civil War, along with World War I and World War II. And no one would ever question if large portions of the population were authentic humans or artificially made humans. Any descendants of these clone beings could have also been eliminated through the reenacted draft of the Vietnam War. Kind of the people drafted would have been the final remnants of the World War II reset generation. Now, these beings were the leftover offspring of the World War II reset generation, and when these resets were completed and the human population was sufficient, another great reset would be planned to reorganize the population, change the things about history which were not wanted or that painted the controllers in a bad light. And this is where you get to the next great reset that these World Economic Forum people have planned for the year 2045. And we've already seen the first stages of that with these vaccines which were said to have completely depopulated the entire realm down to a number where the recloning of people would have been justified. And this is all part of their plans because a lot of these people seem to have a much longer lifespan than the general population. Now, are these just orphans or were they crops of artificial people, science, or clones? Now, they're all the same height, they all seem to be the same age, and that would make me assume they are all of the same make and model. And they could clone massive crops of these people and then eventually move them into military training. And this is how you would get massive sections of the population who will follow any order and carry out any task given to them due to the programming of these clones and have them not having the ability to really think for themselves or question anything. Now, if you've seen the movie The Island, they really get into this idea of clones. That's what the whole movie is about. But the one thing that sets the Ewan McGregor character, Lincoln Six Echo, apart from everyone else is his ability to ask questions, question the narrative, question his surrounding. And this is why in the movie they want to kill off all the clones and regrow the entire population without human curiosity because that's the one factor that people have. And then you could also assume, why are we conspiracy theories? Because conspiracy theorists is we are the ones who question things and don't take what they say at face value. We always question the narratives given to us. We always are questioning the history, the sciences, and basically anything told to us by them. We question it, and therefore we have found a completely alternate version of reality. Here's some more pictures of these clones and these orphan trains. Every one of them seems to be the same age, the same kind of height, model, and things like that, which makes more questions than answers. And it's very bizarre because most people have never heard of this or questioned anything that was given to us by history. But when you start to dig deeper and deeper, more and more information comes to light, which proves that they're not telling you the truth. So, as of 2023, 2024, 2025, many stories of artificial wombs and birthing chambers are widespread. Now, this is just the recycling of historical events and the repeating of events that the people choose not to believe. And when a false history is taught and learned, the truth is never fully realized. And for this reason, we are doomed to repeat these events or make the choice to stand firm in the truth and correct the things that continue to repeat or that continue repeating. Now, several companies can even be found that offer designer clones for the price of $100,000 to $150,000 each. Private companies like Clonaid and other secret companies are only known to the super wealthy and elite class of those who are labeled as controllers. Now, evidence of this is becoming more and more well known as the controllers hide everything they do in plain sight. Throughout TV programs and movies, documentation of clones has occurred for many years. Shows like The X Files, Star Trek, movies like Blade Runner, The Island, which we just talked about, Jurassic Park, Star Wars, Multiplicity, The Matrix, Avatar, Island of Dr. Moreau, The Boys from Brazil, The Sixth Day movie, and many others. It's a common theme over and over. And when you bring this up, that these elites or these controllers must tell you what they're doing, the people who have the ideas of it's actors wearing masks and there's no such thing as cloning, you bring this up to them and they say, well, that's just a deception to trick you from, finding out about the actors wearing the masks. And it's very suspect when doing this research that there's so many unknown factors. This is a major piece. And if you don't take into account how much information and clues are left, you could question who's telling you what theories about what. And also the people who seem to have all the answers by not accepting all of the information. So you can't have all the answers unless you take every piece of evidence and information that you have to form a better theory. And if you can work everything into one theory, most likely that is the way you can figure out what is going on. Now, a lot of these controller people understand that you can order clones of beautiful women, and you can make hypersexualized clones, and anything you could think of you can clone out security personnel and things like that. So people who are billionaires would clone giant workforces of people to serve them, and it's very plausible when you're understanding this kind of research that the clones they buy for $100,000 to $150,000 each are the clones that only last 3 to 4 years. Where if you want, at the end of this, the clones will start getting sick and they'll develop different kinds of ailments which kill them, which you then have to purchase a new clone, or you have to purchase more clone body parts to keep them running if really are have a connection with the people that you've purchased as slaves or something like that. So if you can do this with animals, you can do this with people. And it already is 100% accepted that you can do this with animals. And it is very proven. You can see the process happen right in front of your eyes. And you can, there's numerous pet cloning sites that you can clone your pet and basically clone your pet. If, your pet's old and your pet dies, you can have an identical uh, copy grown and birthed by a dog or a cat or whichever kind of animal that you're trying to get replicated. Now, the significance of artificial wombs: benefits to the mother's health, reduces risk of mortality and diseases. Same sex couples can be parents. Now, that is a big part of this because of the Jewish New World Order, satanic kind of ideas of having two males have a child with their exact genetics, and medical research. And whenever you see medical research, most likely that connects to adrenochrome because this is how they use aborted fetal cells in making their vaccines and stuff like that, is through medical research. So it's basically harvesting babies, infants, cells, and used for scientific purposes, which are it's never anything good. It's always something bad. And them harvesting and creating adrenochrome can be said to be a part of medical research. So these are AI generated images, but there's a lot of connections to this and what they're doing in these underground bases, growing fields of artificial clones and stuff, and then slowly releasing them into the general population, where giant sections of the population would be made up of these clone people and no one would ever know. And then when specific events happen on the television, these clones understand the programming because it's been programmed into their subconscious mind. So if there ever was a draft, these are the people who would respond to it. And certain word phrases would unlock certain things within their subconscious, and they would all report to serve the corporate entity of America. And, all of them would sign up and join in the military. And this is most likely the types of facilities that are underneath the Epstein Island and numerous other locations. Now, most governments around the world would have enough money to set up these massive cloned areas. And this is where you get the honeypots, the blackmail, the Manchurian candidate assassins, and things like that, is most likely they're all clones. Okay. Now, theoretically, they could be growing massive amounts of these clones in deep underground bases, bunkers, and black sites. And this can be used to harvest the clones for food used by the lizard people, or the reptilians, or the vril, or the greys, or whatever, who use the glandular excretions of humans as food, as drugs, and multiple things like that. So, this is the harvesting of adrenochrome, and they could also be using this technology to populate hidden lands outside of our realm, giant underground bases, bunkers, and black sites. If you've seen my video on the DUMBs, deep underground military bases, bunkers, and black sites, these are 4 cubic miles underground, up to 7 cubic miles underground. And if you fill that out with little apartments and stuff. You can fully populate an underground realm. Tell the clones whatever you want to what them to understand is the basis of their reality, and they could, run the civilization as a god, or the super elites who are the founding members of the underground civilization. Kind of like in the Fallout movie, but more in the Island movie, where the people who are the clones working underground never really question anything. There's no need for them to question anything. And they're educated to such a small level, like the people on the above ground world that we're living in. No one ever questions anything, asks any of these hard questions. And when you continuously find things that don't make any sense, they don't have any answers for you, and they label you as a problem thinker. And make sure that you do not become a thought leader in any community and people don't listen to you, because the questions and the things that you come up with, the general public people will just stare at you with that blank fluoride stare of it's not getting in. Any kind of questions you have for them, it just their brain shuts down and they don't understand it, and they move into something more comforting like sports or whatever they're into. So the controllers hide this information within TV and movies as a way of disclosing the technology and ideas surrounding human cloning and what took place after the fall of the old world. And I also have a documentary on the old world and the fall of the old world, which you can see, and it will explain this information more so that you have a better idea of what is going on. And it's a way of warning you what could happen again if we do not understand the tricks and the plans and schemes of these controller people. So the clones come in many types, which range from short term to long term. Early clones are the Mark I clones, have the product type known as organic or synthetic robotics. And these are microchip programmed to perform easy tasks or driven in a state of REM sleep by a human operator. Now, these are for specific tasks and are pre programmed. Now, this can be for deep sea or space missions or assassinations of high value targets. This type of programmable beings can also account for Terminator type robots with human living skin over a metal endoskeleton type of creature being thing. Now, these temporary clones were only used when the cloning technology was remastered during the World War II time period. Now, we can theorize that these Nazis discovered or rediscovered this technology when they took over Germany. Now, it is said they were given this technology by extraterrestrials or throughout the takeover of Germany. And when they start getting into these underground old world areas, they discovered all these birthing chambers, incubators, and things like that, and then got them all up and running again to create a clone type army, which could be used to fulfill anything that they wanted. Now, that also kind of makes sense when you understand the Truman Rhine Meadows death camps, where 4 to 6 million German civilians were just pushed into a field and let starve to death. Was that covering up the evidence of human cloning? Was that to eliminate vast amounts of the Christian German population? We don't know, but there are lots of things that should make you question what was told to us and the narrative surrounding World War II. Now, all the old world replication facilities were found and the research was remastered. Now, possibly they could have cloned a massive army to fight their war, much like this took place in the Civil War and World War One and things like that. You clone a massive army, and the clones kill the non clones as a way of getting rid of all of the DNA of the remnants of Tartaria or the Tartary. Now, eventually, this would become a massive part of the baby boom where much of the population could have been artificially created. And a mother gives birth to a real child. The doctors take the child into another room and then give you a cloned baby. And then your real child most likely is sacrificed or harvested for numbers of reasons. And we can guess it's probably for adrenochrome and things like that, where they're keeping the natural child and giving you a replacement child. Very possible when understanding how evil these people are. Now, Mark II clones were created as the technology improved during the late 70s and early 80s as part of secret government programs. These Mark II clones were REM driven and operated with a VR type headset, possibly within a liquid or fluid filled tank. The Mark II type clones have become obsolete due to the advancement of consciousness transfer into different types of clones known as the Mark III. Now, the MK3 types are the most common types of clones in use today, educated to a specific level and used for several tasks or private uses. They can be grown and delivered as infants or aged to an appropriate level by stimulating the pituitary gland of the clones in a particular way with chemicals. Now, they can be used as sex slaves or as private security forces or for any purposes that are required by the owners or operators. Now, an entire army can be grown and operated independently for those who can't afford it. Now, this may also include the mastering of genetics and manipulation for super intelligent creatures or human animal hybrids. So they can really increase the DNA and the IQ levels of these clones, and you can clone scientists or any kind of things you could think of, you can create through this type of technology. Now, modern day replicants or duplicates may be holographic or light projected beings that can be broadcasted in many different ways and to many different locations. Now, this is a type of real time physical computer generated moving images or a copy scan of a host which is transmitted to another location entirely. Now, eventually, this technology can be transferred into the private sector and used in a number of different ways. From the entertainment industry to the business sector, the possibilities are endless when the controllers stop needing natural humans to further their goals. Now, even now, this technology paired with artificial intelligence will make large portions of the general public obsolete. And this technology raises opportunities for a selected few while lowering it for all others. Now, we can see uh, whistleblowers and insiders from the Dulce facility have come out with pictures of these giant clones grown in these tanks and will explain how this operation is done and how easy this can be done. By only using a couple of skin cells, they can stimulate that with a certain electrical charge, which causes the growing. And if you provide the correct chemicals and stuff, you can grow a person very easily. So, if you start looking into this, which it seems like these general public NPC people are so against these ideas because the one thing that figure out is these cloned people cannot find out that they're cloned people. It causes some kind of feedback loop within their consciousness and they shut down. So another aspect is combining this extraterrestrial or demonic DNA or something within people, and this is how these demonic entities can possess one of these clone hybrid people in order to do work on the surface or things like that. MK Ultra and human cloning. Now, MK Ultra is a mind control and mind persuasion program to reconfigure the thought patterns of a being and change the way in which the neurons fire within the consciousness of an individual. Now, this process of rewriting the brain patterns of a person's mind can be done through physical and mental torture, drugs, or the manipulation of a person's mind through hypnosis. Now, I'd also add that this can be done through anti gravity type of technology. When you separate a person from the reality of their space time into another, the consciousness can't seem to sync back up with the physical body. And this is when a person becomes more and more open to persuasion. And now, if you've seen my video on government experiments into time, space, matter, and consciousness, we get into this a little bit and understand that when they start messing with time and space and reality, a lot of these kind of side effects happen where people forget who they are and who they were, and it takes a while for their consciousness to sync back up with their physical body. Now, this process of rewriting the brain patterns of a person's mind can be done through physical, mental torture, drugs, and the manipulations of a person's mind through hypnosis. This process can fracture the mind or the personality of an individual's consciousness in order to create alternate personalities, which can then be programmed as a sleeper cell of consciousness or even cause demonic possession. Now, MK Ultra mind control or the tactics learned from the MK Ultra program can be used in the creation of clones and the programming of replicants. Now, this process was started by the Nazis during World War II and would study the effects of trauma on the body and mind. And when trauma is induced into the consciousness of an individual, the person affected cannot cope with what they are seeing or experiencing. Now, this causes the personality to warp into something new, which can cope with the trauma which is subjected to the original personality. And once this phenomenon was studied and mastered by the Nazis, it was adopted by the CIA and used to create spies, sex slaves, and even Manchurian candidates for assassination and covert operations. Now, when triggered by a code word or phrase, which may also induce drugs under drugs the person under the MK Ultra programming can shift back and forth between personalities, and the two personalities may never become aware of each other. Now, a lot of this also connects to the MyLab operations. If you've not seen my video into that, it will go into further identifying and understanding the types of operations that are currently ongoing by the black hat people and the white hat type people. Now, this may also connect to demonic possession and the black goo substance. When a demonic being enters the consciousness of a person, they commit acts that may involve violence or sexual depravity, and the person possessed would never truly be aware of his or her actions. And this was all learned in the deep depths of Wewelsburg Castle during the Nazi experiments with the black goose substance. Now, after World War II, the occultist Nazis were brought into the US and other controlled nations by way of Operation Paperclip. And this is how the CIA was formed and also NASA. The world was brainwashed by massive drugging of the population, and radio frequency technology, which could lower the vibration of the entire realm. After this was accomplished, the world was unconnected from God and would be ready for the final days, which we appear to be experiencing right now. Now, here is this Wewelsburg Castle. It was the headquarters of the Nazi SS and had many underground levels in which they would do these types of experimentation and the communication with the black goose substance and many types of extraterrestrials or demonic entities, whichever you want to identify as who they were working with. Now, I did a whole video, full length documentary on the black goose substance. There is a ton of information within this documentary, which will connect further dots and get you to understand kind of what we're up against as a people. And I suggest everyone checking that out because it really will help connect some of the dots further and how these types of operations connect with the vaccines and the technology, the smart technology, and things like that. So before MK Ultra, the world had little to no high technology. There were no cell phones, there were no chemtrails, there was no internet, there were no personal computers, no TV, and far less propaganda and lies created by the government. Now, after the corruption of the world by Operation Paperclip Nazis, the world would rely more and more on television and petroleum based pharmaceutical industry for all states of being. Entertainment and the invented pop culture created by the CIA could persuade the general masses into giving up all control and eventually their minds and personal sovereignty or free will. Now, this would replace God with government and television, which is one of the ultimate goals of the New World Order controllers. So, mind control works best on young minds who have not been subjected to outside stimulants and those who have not been made aware of God's word or his influence. Now, these individuals would be of a certain vibrational frequency, which can more easily be manipulated by drugs or programming by an external force. Now, once the mind reaches a certain point, they have already formed the basis on which reality functions. And by using the young, reality can be manipulated into a false reality needed to push a person's consciousness to the breaking point, which is the goal of those seeking to control others. Now, this is why so much importance is placed on children and why pedophiles try to normalize abhorrent behavior and sex acts in order to control their victims. By molesting the young, behavior traits are locked in, and those abused can carry on the same activities which they were once subjected to. A revolving cycle of darkness which only the light of God can free a person from. God forgives the sins a being has is subjected to, and because their mind is fractured, the hidden personality may never face the truth of the actions they were subjected to. And when a person's mind is split, the altered personality forms, and this is why people seem to be so lost, is because they can't get out of the behavior traits of the altered personality. And the altered personality is the one that furthers the fall from God and the separation from God. So a person is affected, people are effected, and your consciousness is infected. And that's kind of a way of understanding how they start this operation on a person, and then when enough individual people are affected by this programming, they can then steer the larger group of people and further degrade the consciousness of all mankind. So as the MK Ultra programming was beginning, so was the invented culture of the CIA and the hidden hand of Freemasonry. This was TV culture, which would show the viewers how families were supposed to conduct themselves. This would always provide a happy ending where everything follows a script and goes according to plan. Unlike life and the family unit, they would slowly be replaced by government, drugs, and television. This would force the breaking of the final piece of civility and remove God from homes. Eventually, the two parent household would be broken up, and the children would be forced into government public schooling, and the invented culture would aid in any way needed. Like the music industry and the illusion of wealth on the TV, or whatever programming was heard on the radio. The youth would become more and more um, di- di- divisive and ignored the teachings of their elders and the family unit, which would be slowly eliminated. And we can see that clear as day as of 2025, how every family is broken and separated because you have both parents working and you have both parents working multiple jobs, and nobody is watching the children. No one's teaching their children anything because you're relying on the public schools to do so, and when you rely on the public schools to do so, we see how they want to turn your kids into homosexuals, transgenderism. They want to trust science over God, and God and science is always combating itself. And there's no way to really fix this unless you go back to what was done after this World War II and make the changes necessary. So, after the 1950s and 60s, the drugging of the people sufficiently divided the people to influence culture to um, the point mass events could occur. Now, this could have been recreation drugs like LSD, um, methamphetamine, stimulus, alcohol, along with mass media events like the Vietnam War and the moon landing. Now, these events would slowly begin to push the masses into a fractured state of existence and move towards the next steps of the drug induced 1970s, along with the high technology era of the 1980s. When the population was drugged and fully believing the new culture presented to them by the television, the family unit would be separated by the introduction of women in the workplace. Where the 1950s generation could fully support a family with one income, the newer 1980s generation would slowly need more financial support to sustain comfort. When two primary incomes, the family unit was divided, with women and men competing with each other, which would create more division within the family unit. And once again, invented culture of the government would become the role models and teach the youth that the rights were wrong and the wrongs were right. And this would form a rebellion within each household. Now, the public education would propagate the youth of the world into the final events, which would become the world we see and know today. This would account for the creation of the internet and the full separation of the family unit. Two-parent homes would be rare and would cause the financial disparity needed to then divide the children into single-parent homes. And this would create a new youth which would only trust the word of celebrities and the culture which was created by government. Now, today's youth follow the teachings of TV personalities like sports figures, music artists, which further rebellion and the need for more government control. Now, we are moving towards another great reset where the government depopulates the world and will replace them once again with artificial beings, which will be raised by the government, creating an obedient worker class of drones. This new breed of humans, which will be known as Homo borgenesis, will be taught by artificial intelligence and only learn what the controllers need them to know to usher in the final days. Now, you can look up Homo borgenesis for yourself. Anyone who has these nanotechnology mRNA vaccines introduced into them are these Homo borgenesis, and they are controlled by outside stimulus like the MK Model 1 clones that are microchip driven. The microchips have been injected into your DNA, self replication occurs, and then you are programmed by Wi Fi signals and things like that. So it's just a replaying of events that already have taken place, and we're seeing this play out now, where all these people who are vaccinated seem to be very emotional people who are triggered very easily into violence, and they can only basically be programmed by outside stimuli, like the signals from the television, radio frequency type weapons. I did a video on directed energy weapons and how they can completely rewrite a person's consciousness through outside energy forces, whether that's radio frequency weapons or light stimulation or anything like that. But this is all a very real thing when you sit back and look at this, and it's very scary to understand and theorize how many real people are there. Well, I don't think there's that many, to tell you the truth, because this research is so groundbreaking and we have all this evidence, and it seems to not go anywhere because main sections of the population are these NPC people who are programmed. So it's very interesting to put all this information together and to try to explain it to people who they don't want to hear it. It's very disconcerting and it's very troubling. But if you're an awake and aware person, this may help you to identify who some of these people are. Now, as of 2022, 2025, this the general population lives in a state of constant confusion and a state of permanent unknowing. The youth does not seek God or the answers provided by God. The population is all fully drugged with mood stabilizers, antidepressants. They're all taking Xanax. They're all drinking lots of alcohol and widespread recreational drugs. The public education system has destroyed the individual's ability to think and question. The youth has been brainwashed by the culture into believing there are more than two genders. The teachers groom the children for sexual activities, which the TV culture furthers by accepting this behavior, which furthers the agendas needed by these controllers. Now, those who oppose the propaganda are silenced, banned, or deleted from attempting to awake those who are under the spell or asleep, and some are even murdered. Now, the future is always uncertain and unknown for those who see this deception playing out in real time. One thing is certain: the only way out of this is to ask the right questions, find the truth in Jesus Christ, and the only way forward is through his name and by understanding this. The system will then have no use for you, and you will find yourself free of the control paradigm and free from these controllers. Now, next, I want to talk about some of these companies. This is a company called BioVinic, and it is a pet cloning company. So you can look this up for yourself. I believe it's $6,000, but you can have an identical clone of your pet grown and delivered to your door. And this is much like how children were delivered by mail and the post office and stuff like that. So this is a real thing. You can look into this for yourself. There's also a company called Clonaid, which you can clone your ideal spouse, your anything you could think of. If you have the money, these things can be achieved. Now, how this works, they take a human cloning donor egg, they remove the egg from the nucleus. The egg is fused with the new DNA. The stem cells removed from the embryo, used to treat Alzheimer's and heart disease and diabetes and all this stuff. And then genetic material or DNA taken from one person's cell can be cloned. Now they create all these health problems and then go, look how we can solve it with this human cloning. But this was how things were done back in the old world when people became sick or something. You would just grow a new liver or grow new kidneys or grow a new heart or things like that. And it would be 100% of your DNA. So they take an embryo of a person, they withdraw or suck out the genetic material of the original person's whose DNA it was, and they can then insert whatever DNA they want. Now, this could be two men DNA into making a person. This could be two men and a woman. This could be a man, a woman, and some animal DNA or something. It really is a wild, wild concept when understanding what these people are doing and that there no laws are going to stop these people. Like the Epstein Island, they can create a facility and do all the kind of genetic experiments they want. If you've seen the Island of Dr. Moreau movie, it is very into the idea of creating hybrids and chimeras, combining animal DNA, human DNA, and things like that. So now we'll get into synthetic embryo models, and this is using stem cells made specialized into three types needed to mimic a human embryo. So now they don't even need a woman's egg or embryo. They can make an artificial thing and put the DNA in that way. And I've also seen where they can make artificial sperm too with different kinds of chemicals, but they can use this with nanotechnology as a way of fertilizing eggs and things like that by using nanotechnology. So the next big thing is lab grown meat. And we've all seen how much the TV and this New World Order society is behind the ideas of lab grown meat because of climate change and the farting cows and things like that. But when you understand that lab grown meat is cloned meat, all of this makes a little bit more sense and it gets darker and darker and more evil. Because what they're basically doing is they're going to clone human meat and get you into doing cannibalism. And this is one of these satanic things that they're really into, legalizing cannibalism, legalizing pedophilia, and they'll say, well, it's not a real person, it's a cloned child, and therefore it's okay for them to have sex with it. It's not a real person that you're eating, it's lab grown person, and therefore it doesn't have a soul or whatever, like they're really concerned about having a soul or not. But this is a major part of the idea behind this human cloning. Now, supposedly they take a biopsy of this cow. They convert the cows into stem cells. They add growth hormones and growth serum, creating these myotubes, which turn into muscle tissue, which then can be converted into meat. So the same thing can be done with human DNA. They take human DNA, they isolate the stem cells, they then add a growth serum and turn this into meat, and therefore now you've just created cloned human meat, and you've got people addicted to the idea and taste of human meat. And this is like the movie Soylent Green, where it's people. You're growing people into these chambers, you're harvesting them for meat, and you can really look into this lab grown meat, and it's all a Bill Gates New World Order type of thing. It is really evil and disgusting, and they're normalizing it. So they take the most horrific thing you could think of and normalize it to the point where it's your kids are going to be grown up raised on this human meat. And I would think there's a big connection to McDonald's and things like that, because they always are finding human DNA in Wendy's food, in McDonald's, in Taco Bell, and things like that. So this is how they will legalize cannibalism and adrenochrome. Adrenochrome will be made legal because we clone a body of a child or something. They torture and stimulate the cloned body in a bag, and they then bleed off this thing and create this adrenochrome, and that's how they'll legalize it. So, the science behind cloning is very real and has to be considered a factor if you're trying to figure out what is going on within our world. Now, do the aspects of human cloning explain things like the theory of NPCs, those who have no personal consciousness? They can only be programmed by the outside sources like the TV, like the radio, and this is done by using specific catchphrases and specific word phrases like spells on a person. Now, this information is also plausible when understanding the MK Ultra programming and other forms of mind control. Now, some people never want to accept any theories or ideas that may contradict the ideas they have about what's going on. Now, the general public or the NPC crowd will never look into anything that goes against their programming. We, as researchers, must be willing to use the theories available to us to form the best ideas to what is happening in our realm. We can all understand the ideas or concepts of actors or operatives wearing masks to perform tasks or missions. But when you start to add science and satanic experimentation to the equation, some want to keep the ideas of cloning far away from themselves and keep things grounded in the false reality that is our world. So, These people who cannot entertain the ideas of human cloning will accept the ideas of our world or realm being repopulated after the Great Reset event. They will accept the ideas of lab grown meat and animal cloning, but when it comes to people, they begin to deflect and claim that you are trying to trick them. And this is a deflection tactic used by Freemasons and those who are working directly for the controllers themselves. Now, we can see or identify these people or who these people are. They only want to tell you the information the controllers want you to hear, and they will never listen to the evidence of ideas that go against the orders of their Masonic brothers or the controllers themselves. Now, these people may be clones themselves, or they went through some type of MK Ultra programming in order to obtain the level of fame or the lifestyles that they want. And that is the living in the big house, driving the leased car, and, the things like that, where you can see these people all have the same kind of hobbies and traits because that's kind of what they're told to do as a way of discouraging others. So, in the end, you can believe what you want to believe. It does not matter to me either way. This video is not really for the NPC type general public people. This is for the people who want to understand and send themselves on another rabbit hole, which will further their understanding backed by fact. So, one of the identifying markers of human cloning is the appearance of the attached earlobes. When the cloning process begins, the growth of the clone is highly accelerated by stimulation of the pituitary gland. Now, this causes certain features to be incomplete. We may see missing or deformed toes or fingers, um, problems with the tongue, problems with the speech patterns, and the aforementioned attached earlobes. Now, some of these people might also be missing eyebrows, eyelashes, and small things like that, which would give them a different appearance. Now, in order to counteract this, science has begun to grow human type ears on the backs of mice and rodents. Now, if the ears are too mangled and deformed, a transplant can be performed. And we can see this with like the Joe Biden clone. The older one has these different earlobes, and this cloned creature thing has these attached earlobes. Now, here's pictures of the earlobes being grown on the backs of these mice. What what would be the purpose of doing this on mice other than they needed a wide ranging ability to have these earlobes on track for these mice? And I think they also includes like noses and things like that. But it's very interesting. This is a major thing that's going on, and they tell you they're doing it, but they don't really talk about why they're doing it. And this human cloning operation is one of the main whys they would be doing this. Okay, now, another theory that's been going around is the idea of a massive cloning laboratory or multiple laboratories under the facility known as Epstein Island. Now, this is where high profile celebrities and the so called elites go to purchase synthetic replicants, children, and beings for torture and adrenochrome. Now, you can purchase genetic copies of any DNA available, hybrids, and almost anything you could think of. If you have the money, many things can be accomplished. Now, men and women can be purchased for sexual purposes, security reasons, upgrading their DNA, and many other things. Other clone labs are said to be under the Getty Museum and under Alcatraz Island and San Francisco. And many old world cities and towns throughout the US also have access to these cloning facilities, whether it's by these underground trains and things like that. But it's a massive, massive thing that is ongoing. And it should make people understand they have so many of these clones out in civilization, and this is how they keep the real humans from ever rising up and gaining power. Because if anyone ever decided to start a new movement and get people together and unified, these NPC people would be the first ones to try to derail your operation, infiltrate your operation, and things like that. So here's a expanded view of this Epstein Island, and we know it goes under several levels, and there hasn't been any disclosure of what may be in these lower levels of this Epstein Island. Now, reasons for that could be connections to lizard people, Vril, different types of extraterrestrials, and these cloning labs, which they cannot disclose to the people, because once again, if the clones found out they were clones, it would cause some kind of feedback loop in their brains and they would just shut down and become non active. Very interesting stuff. And you can look into this a little bit more, but Epstein Island was one of 12 to 13 islands. There are multiple islands, and multiple cloning laboratories could be producing all different types of clones. So, very interesting. Now, dietary requirements of clones. Another way to identify clones or artificial beings is the things they eat and how they eat. Now, they mainly eat a plant based diet along with certain types of nuts and soups or broths, and they do not eat complex proteins like meats. Rarely would you ever see one of these people consume any types of food in public. Seeing them swallowing food and eating is said to be not pleasant due to sometimes regurgitating food that they consume. Now, I've heard about this for a while, but there is definitely something to this, and this is why you'll never see these people out in public at a restaurant eating food because they're eating weird shit and it has to be done out of sight of normal people, or if enough people all saw the same types of people eating and regurgitating food, you'd figure it out pretty quick. So many nations have their own types of cloning operations. Because of this, subtle differences can be seen. Chinese clones are said to have yellowish eye color, and cell degradation causes subtle differences in behavior or looks. Many times, clones will look fatter or puffier as they retain water and fluid if they are cheaply grown. Now, what comes to mind is like the Amanda Bynes person. Most likely, they kill the original person and clone a replacement, and then you see this fat clone wandering around that's always having these MK Ultra breakdowns and stuff like that. So they also do not sleep as much as a regular person, only getting 3.5 to 4 hours of sleep per day or cycle. This is why certain celebrities go missing for long periods of time and they return looking fatter and more bloated. Darker skinned people, when they're cloned, will have a lighter skin or appearance. And you can also see many examples of this if you do your own research. So it's really interesting. The more you look into this and the more you kind of understand these theories and you know what to look for, you will find it more and more and more. So, a final thing I wanted to touch on is the DNA collection through PCR testing. These PCR tests are said to swab deep into the back of the throat and up into the nasal cavity, and this is a way of collecting a specific type of skin cells or DNA from a person. They then collect this DNA and send it off for testing, but they're really categorizing it, isolating the DNA, and preparing for the next wave of this great reset, which is coming in order to fully repopulate the world with another group of replicants. Now, one of the final things I did want to cover, this is, I just said this, but the DNA collection operation that went alongside the COVID-19 pandemic. Now, if the world was to be mass depopulated by vaccines, new crops of replacements would need to be grown. And this is all a part of this great reset of 2045. And we can assume something similar must have occurred during the great reset events of the 1800s. If the world population was down to such a low level, cloning would be necessary to jumpstart civilization once again, and the DNA needed would have been acquired with these PCR tests. Now, this may also include DNA collected from the boomer generation when that generation was vaccinated for smallpox. And this would ensure a large enough DNA pool that you would have multiple types of DNA that you could clone. And this also kind of explains the doppelganger idea, where you can see identical clones of people who are not related, and they just look like identical twins and they've been separated for miles and miles and miles. That's a whole nother rabbit hole you could go down if you type in doppelgangers and find how many people look like identical twins, whether it's a glitch in the matrix, some kind of glitch in the programming we're in, or it's just remnants of these artificial people from this old world reset. The clone type people find identical looking spouses and they make identical offspring. And it's a very interesting thing. And a big part of this COVID 19 operation is to collect DNA, sort this DNA. Now, whether that was taken over by the good guys, the bad guys, the DNA is collected, the DNA is being stored in these underground bases and things like that, and is a massive part of what is going on. So that's going to bring us to the end of this video on human cloning. I hope everybody kind of got something out of this and understands the theories and ideas that it's not just one thing. It's multiple things going on. It's multiple types of replication, DNA sorting, cherry picking specific DNAs and bloodlines, continuing certain types of bloodlines and things like that. And this is a major part of this operation. Now, other things I wanted to share are how a lot of these old world people all seem to have copies, multiple replicants, and things like that. So I want to show you guys some of the pictures out of that. I hope you enjoyed this video, and we will see you next time. Okay, I wanted to add one more thing to this video on cloning and the aspects of cloning and doppelgangers and things like that. So this is going to be a bonus information segment at the end of the video here. So there is these two guys, and one of them lives in New York City and the other one lives in Los Angeles. And this is like the weirdest rabbit hole you will ever go down if you've got a couple hours and you're bored on some day. And if you look up Perry Caravello live, and this other guy, Robert Paul Champagne. Now, I became aware of this Perry Caravello back in like 2003 when this movie Windy City Heat came out. Now, this is like one of my favorite movie of all time. And if you go on YouTube and type in Windy City Heat, there's a free version you should watch. You should really check it out because it will put you into the mind of one of the craziest people you'll ever experience in your life. So, this Perry Caravello guy, I can't even begin to explain the madness and the mania of this guy. Okay, it's so crazy, and I'm like obsessed with this guy. I've been following this guy now for like over 20 years, and he does a show on YouTube and Rumble and Twitch and Kick and all this called Perry Caravello Live. Okay, now while you're doing this research on the Your Mom's House podcast with Tom Segura and Christina Pazitsky, or they've talked about this guy, this Robert Paul Champagne guy. And if you type in Robert Paul Champagne on YouTube, you'll see videos of this other guy. And they're like identical twins or clones or something. It is the weirdest thing ever when you look into this. Okay? So this is Perry Caravello, and he does this show in his apartment. And he's always screaming and telling everybody that he's not gay. However, he did get in trouble and had to jerk off a guy and let this guy blow him back in 1992. You could type in Perry Caravello 1992 story and hear all about it. But the clips of this guy, it's absolutely insanity that this is a real person. And then there's this other guy, this Robert Paul Champagne guy, and he looks like a identical fucking clone twin of this guy. And their personalities are very, very similar. It is so weird. And it's like bizarro world when you look into this. It's so weird, just the conspiracy surrounding this. And a lot of people are aware of both people, but it's so odd. People in show business or whatever don't get these two together. And there's so many similarities. It is so weird. So when you see this guy talking and you see this is the Robert Paul Champagne guy and this is Perry Caravello, and you see them talking and stuff, it's like it's like some kind of government cloning experiment to see how different models of their clones are like operating or something. It's really, really weird. And the more you look into this, the more you will find how similar these two guys are. And they look like identical twins. It's so bizarre. I don't know if they have the same parent, the same father, this Cookie Caramello grifter character, or what, but it is very, very weird how similar these people are. And you can look up Robert Paul Champagne, he's got an Instagram, and you can look up Perry Caravello, he's got an Instagram. And it's just so weird. I can't tell you how weird this is when you look into it and research it more and more and more. And people are aware of these two guys. It's almost like a secret society or something that follows and monitors these people. It's very weird. I can't. stress to you how weird this is when you start looking into how they're separated, but they've put clips of this Robert Paul Champagne on Perry Caravello Live, and it's just like it just doesn't register. It's so weird. And this Perry Caravello guy is a con man and tells people he's going to go snowboarding and scams people, and it's so weird. I'm telling you, it is the weirdest thing ever. So the Dr. Drew character, Dr. Drew, well, he's not a character, but Dr. Drew has had this guy on his show a bunch talking about this Robert Paul Champagne. And if you know where Dr. Drew comes from, he comes from the Adam Carolla radio show, and they did Loveline and stuff. Well, this Perry Caravello was on Adam Carolla's network on the Big Three podcast back in the day. So the Dr. Drew character is 100% aware of who Perry Caravello is. And it's like an inside secret within Hollywood and stuff about this Perry Caravello guy. It's like the biggest inside joke that's ever existed ever. Is this Perry thinks he's a star. He had his own movie, but he is just in this delusional world where he is the biggest star in the world. And he has all these celebrities writing into his show, and he thinks Gina Carano is coming over to his house, and Scarlett Johansson, and he's got Wilford Brimley writing him, and Kevin Spacey, and this Randy Callahan, which was like his old boyfriend or something that he got in trouble with in the 90s. And it's really really weird. It's like looking into a bizarro reality and finding two people who are like almost identically the same put in these different scenarios, and the government like keeps track of them or something. And there's so many weird things I could get into and talk about that makes me think there's definitely something going on here. Out of all of the weird rabbit holes and conspiracies I've looked into, this is the by far the weirdest thing ever because I'm so into this Perry Caravello Live. I watch all the shows. I watch everything. I've been following this guy forever. I've listened to every Big Three podcast multiple times. It's so weird. And once you start going down this and getting into this world of Perry Caravello Live, it will really, it's like you can't stop watching it. It's so crazy that this is a real guy. And this guy's just out there. You know, you've probably seen if you follow like the Cartnark videos, Perry Caravello was on there, and he's just the star of his own movie. And it's very, very weird and bizarre. I cannot stress how weird and bizarre this is. So this is by far the weirdest conspiracy ever. If you go down this rabbit hole, God be with you because it is a crazy, crazy thing. And you can follow this guy on YouTube, Perry Caravello Live, and just slowly get into the world of Perry Caravello. It's very insane. But I thought I'd put that in there for some people who might be interested to look into this and go down this rabbit hole.
Look, it happened once when I first got into this business, and I didn't do nothing but let him suck my dick and jerk him off. That was it.